Hey guys, it's Brian from iDrive9, and today we are replacing the rear bushings on our classic 1967 Porsche. Not that hard to do as long as it's been done before in the last 50 years of your car's life at some point in time. Otherwise that rubber could be vulcanized onto the metal and you'll have to cut that or burn that off. But hopefully we don't run into that problem. Now this is an early car, so the two different size bushings, the later cars from like 68, 69 onward up until the 80s had two of the same type bushing. But for us, two different size bushings, we're going to get them on. And if you've stumbled upon this for the first time, my channel is basically all about DIYing Porsches, whether it be the classic air-cooled 911, 912 like this one, or the modern day Boxers and 911s, and maybe even a Cayman and a Cayenne coming soon. So hit that subscribe button and follow along as we replace the bushings in a classic Porsche 911, 912 body. Let's go. Alright guys, we have the Porsche jacked up and the rear wheels removed, so we can get in there and start doing these spring plate bushings. But if you're not quite sure how to jack up all four corners of your Porsche for this job, because you have to have all four up and level, and we're going to show you that, here's a video over here on how to jack up your classic Porsche. Alright, back to getting this taken care of. Let's go. Alright guys, this is kind of, I just want to go through the basic setup of what's going on here. There's a bushing under this plate, and then there's a bushing that sits inside the body itself. And the torsion bar that runs in here, this spring plate here rotates, and that's what kind of gives you your travel. Now, yeah, you do have a shock, but this here is where all your suspension rides into here. These two bolts here, this one here adjusts your toe, which is when your wheel goes like this on the car. And this one here is your camber, which adjusts if your wheel goes in or if it comes out. So those two bolts. And these four bolts here, they just hold this cover and that bushing onto the spring plate. The spring plate actually is this part here, and it actually has splines in here that the torsion bar runs into. So we'll need to grease that all up. Then there's a second bar, I don't know if you can see this, but there's actually two plates in there. You can see the back side of the bolt. So those are eccentric bolts. So as you turn them, they move as a cam. They move the two plates because the other plate is part of this. All right, and then you have, let's see if I can get this in here. The light is kind of bad. These two bolts here, they simply attach this plate to the trailing arm. And so we're gonna have to take off those two bolts, and then these two bolts, and then those four, and then pull this whole thing out, and then replace the bushings, and then put it all back in. Also, you're gonna have to remove this little cover here, which is simply just an 8mm nut on the back there, and that will take this off so that way you can slide out your spring plate and your torsion bar. All right, so let's get to this. All right, guys, hopefully you can see this better. Here are those two bolts right back in there. They hold the spring plate to the trailing arm. And again, this is your camber, which adjusts how your wheel goes this way. And that's your toe, and that's if you're how your wheel goes in and out that way. And then those four bolts there. What's critical is the angle of this. This is your ride height. And you measure this before you take it off, but you have to have everything else disconnected. And the only other thing we have to disconnect is the rear bolt on the shock down there, which comes off pretty easily. So the very first thing we want to do though is we have to get in here with a screwdriver and basically scratch out where the two plates meet. That way we can get these bolts lined up kind of where it's at now. That way it's out of alignment, because this will throw off your alignment if you don't tighten these correctly. So let's go ahead and mark this with a screwdriver, and then we'll go ahead and drop off that back bolt on the shock there. Okay, all you gotta do is just take your screwdriver, get it in there, and start etching a line so you can at least get it back in the ballpark when we're done. And just as an idea, I took time and I went ahead and washed the inner fender well just to kind of get all the grime and dirt out of here to give us some more room. And I shot penetrating oil on all the bolts that we'll be removing just to kind of make our life a little bit easier. All right, so let's head back and let's get that shock tower, that shock removed. Okay, with your car jacked up, get you level and zero in on making it level. You got to get the car level. So we're going to raise that front end a little bit until that bubble is in the middle. So just raise the front end up a little bit, shim it up on those jack stands until she's level. That way, everything else will factor in. Okay, let's get this bolt off. All right, we now have our shock disconnected from the back, and it looks like it's probably time to replace these conies. But we'll have to do that on another day because we don't have them here with us. So let's now focus our attention back up to the front. Okay guys, those two bolts that hold the spring plate to the trailing arm, those are 19 millimeters. And so you'll just go ahead and impact those off, and we'll move on to those camber and toe bolts. All right, to take off those two 19 millimeters, you're gonna have to do this double wrenching method in a sense. You gotta hold the back side and then remove the front side. So 19 millimeter on both sides. Just go ahead and we'll take off the top and the bottom bolts. There's just not enough room, at least for me, to get my impact in there. So I'm gonna have to do it the old-fashioned way. So give me a minute here and we'll get those two bolts off real quick. I'm not gonna lie, those two bolts that hold on the trailing arm and the spring plate are on there pretty tight, pretty damn tight. So be prepared for that battle. Now let's get to those two camber and that toe end bolts, and let's see if we get those off, and then we can kind of move forward to the front. Let's go. Okay, next we're gonna take off the toe and the camber bolts, and they are just 19 millimeters on this end. On the back end, they are a 12 millimeter metric hex nut. So we should be able to take these off just from right in here. Yep, all right, got those done. So here are those two bolts that we took out from right there. And as you can see, they're kind of, one side is a circle, the other side is kind of an oblong in order for these bolts to work. Now, they're in position where they go in. So the top one is this one, and that bottom one is the bigger one that goes on the lower part of that. Notice the size difference, and notice the size difference in the nuts on top as well. So that way you can put them back in the right order. The shorter one goes on top, and the bigger one goes on the bottom. So let's go ahead and pull those and put them in some parts washer because they're pretty damn dirty. All right, hopefully now you can kind of see the two plates and how they've popped off. And then see our scribe line in there? So when we go to line this all back up, get my head out of the camera there, we can get it done. But there's a plate that attaches the trailing arm, and then there's this other plate that comes up into there. Next, we're going to take off these four bolts that hold the cover onto it. Keep in mind that on this one here, there's a spacer, or like a washer, right here. So when that pops out, make sure you grab it. The other three are just normal bolts with washers. And those are 17 millimeters. And let's get those off now. Do not remove this though. Just take off this cover plate because we have to index this now to the body. And I'll show you how to do that with just a scribe mark if you don't have the tool, or how to use the tool. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, we need to take off this torsion bar cover. And essentially all it is just an 8 millimeter nut back there. So 8 millimeter socket, put it on there, and 9 times out of 10 they're not on there hard, they're tight, and you can just kind of take it like that, and then it should just kind of I said should, damn it. loosen that up a little bit more. There it is. And that just comes out. And that just has a seal around it, and that's just what holds it to it. So now we can straight shot for the torsion bar. All right, let's pull this one out. This is that one that has the spacer down there. See it right there trying to come out? Let's see if that'll focus there. Just a little spacer. So it goes in like that little hat type in like this. All right, so let's go ahead and get those other three out and we'll see what we're gonna do next. All right, so all 4 bolts are off of our cover, and one-handedly, you should be able to pull this off. Well, maybe not with one hand then. All right, let me get 2 hands, and I just want to take this off. Try not to move this part here, just this part right here. All right, here we go. Oh, look at that bush and how it has mushroom out. We'll get all these bushings off and I'll show you compared to the new bushings how those look. So, all right, that is off. Now, this is that time we talk about this. At this point, you can kind of see it's completely disconnected and it's still held in inside by the torsion bar. This is the angle in which you need to measure to remember for next time. If you plan on lowering your car or raising your car, this is what lowers and raises the rear end of your Porsche. So you need to make an accurate measurement of this. So 2 ways to do it. You can get your screwdriver and you can come in here and you can scribe a mark so you can remember what angle this goes into, or you can run down to Harbor Freight or Amazon or wherever, and I'll have a link to all the tools and things I use in this video in the description. Yes, it is an affiliates thing, and yeah, I do earn, you know, a nickel or so, but it helps me buying parts and doing projects for you guys to show you how to fix stuff on your own. So this is an angle finder, and it's a magnetic base, so you gotta watch it. And you're just gonna set it on there, and then we're gonna zoom in and see what it's at. So right now it's saying about 31, 32 degrees, which is about right, because I believe for a 912 of this year, it's 33, and for a 911, because it's heavier, it's 36. So that seems to be like it's in the ballpark. So with that, we've measured it. We know where we need to be at. We've also scribed a line on the body to remember that. So let's go ahead and let's pull this arm off. But before you do that, take a moment and whack softly with a rubber mallet. Knock this part, beat on it just a little bit, because remember there's splines in here that torsion bar runs into, and we need to be able to get it off there. So many times, the problem is that torsion bar is stuck and seized inside the swing plate here, and we either have to heat this up, or we have to pop this off and hammer it out, or sometimes you even have to drastically cut the bar if it is rusted up and seized up in here. So let's give that a couple whacks, and let's pull that off and let's see what it looks like. All right, let's see if that thing will come off in one shot. So this is not what you want to happen. See how that torsion bar, the orange bar in there, it is still stuck inside of here, and we need to get this off. And unfortunately, this back here is super greasy, and it's round, so there's not much to hold on to kind of pull this out. So you're gonna have to push this back into that splines, because there's splines on this side, inside the body, and wiggle, 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 until you can get this off. If not, drill out a hole here, take a punch, and knock that bar out. And again, you do not want to cut it if you possibly can avoid it. But work this plate off of that bar. So give me a few minutes, let me see what I can pull off. Must be a Christmas miracle. I was able to just wiggle it free. Let's see. Oh, and I lied. All right, and then wiggling it free. There she is, got it. Now we have our spring plate off, and you can see back on that back side. Sweet, and there's our torsion bar. And so it has splines just like this on both sides, and that's how you index or determine the angle that it came down when we made our scribe mark earlier. So the best thing, oh, and here's our other bushing. Let's see if we can't. Actually, let me go ahead and just pull this bar out, and then we'll get that bushing out. And there's that other end. And we'll just take this completely out for now. Try not to get this messed up and damaged, and we'll put some more grease on this before we put it back in. Let's grab that bushing out of there. Let's see if we can pull this bushing out. There she is. Oh yeah, look how mushroomed it is. Yep, it was time for new bushings in this Porsche. And of course you can see my original color was yellow at one time. And so, all right, at this point, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of clean up this a little bit more. I'm gonna fix some of this undercoating that has flaked off. So when we go to put this all back together, it's a little bit nicer and more functional, and kind of stop some of this that's coming down. And then we're gonna throw our bolts into our parts washer. And then if you want, you can sand blast or clean up your cover and your spring plate and get those cleaned up for when we put it back together to look somewhat nice. I'm also going to take a moment and use that gold spray paint, that zinc paint, which there's a link in the description at the bottom where to buy that at, and just touch up the heads of these bolts just to make it look nice. And I think I'll also paint black the cover and the actual spring that goes in there, just to make it look kind of cool. All right, so time to start painting and washing parts. So I wanted to show you the difference between the new bushings and the old ones. Now, of course, this style here is for the early 911s and 912s. The later ones have basically two of these. But you can see how over time these have mushroomed out. And my understanding is because these came off the car so easily, that these have been replaced at some point in time in the last 50 plus years of the car's life. So these are not factory originals, these are aftermarket bushings that were put in at some point in time before I owned it. So you can kind of get an idea of how those are supposed to look. Just over time it squeezes that rubber and pushes it, and that's what gets you your ride qualities. So just an idea of what the difference in bushings look like, and why you should take the time and money to replace those. Alright, so here are the bolts that came off of the swing arm, or the swing plate, and the control arm, and we're just going to hit them with this, and I'll put a link in the description below where to buy this at. It's just a zinc gold colored plating, which would originally been factory color on these. Obviously they're not paint, it was from the factory, it was plated, but for this, just to give it a little bit of a glamour, I guess, a little bit of a shine, we're just going to hit the tops of those bolts and these washers, and we'll put them back on the car. If you want to see more about this, I'll put a link up to a description up here to another video in which I go in a little bit more about all of this. So let's get this going. So before and after. So just a little bit of a paint, nothing special, just to kind of dress it up a little bit. All right, so this is our spring plate, and if we can kind of look down in there a little bit, see if we can't get an angle that will show off those. Let's see here if we can focus. Right there, you can see those splines. Those splines are what the torsion bar slides into. And there's also splines inside the body in that torsion tube that torsion bar slides into. Well, you can see it looks pretty dry down in there. So what you want to do is take some grease and a little spatula there and get that grease in there and get them down on those threads, and then also thread on those on the bar itself. So let's get this together. All right, torsion bar back in. Now when you get it to there, you're gonna have to grab a hold of it and kind of lift it up until you can find the hole. And then it should slide in if you're lined up correctly. There it is. Now we're gonna take that grease, we're gonna grease up this end and put a little grease on here where we wiped it down, and then we're gonna put our cover on. Okay, time to put our new bushing in. It's gonna go in just like that. This outside edge is dry into the body. Okay, then you put your synthetic grease on the inside of the bushing and on this lip right here. But again, this side here that goes into the body, keep that dry. And then we'll just take it, slide it on there really carefully, and just push it into place. Now we can get our spring plate and put it on there and start to measure it. Okay, so remember, when we measured this before, we were about that 32 mark. So we're not quite indexed right. So you're gonna have to pull off the spring plate and then move it up one notch and then measure again. And if it's not quite right, you can then pull the whole torsion bar out and move it up or down in order to achieve the degree that you need of the angle. So both the outside of the bar and the inside of the bar help adjust the measurement. So let's go ahead and give this a few more tries. It may take you a dozen times before you get the combination right of the inside and the outside of turning the bar and rotating this spring plate out here to get the desired measurement that you need. So let's go ahead and keep doing this until we get it right. All right, took a couple tries, probably a good 7 or 8, maybe even 10. But we were able to get this really close to that 33 number that we wanted. So we're good to go there. So now that we have that squared away, make sure that we can just push this in nice and tight. And let's get our other bushing. Let's get that in place, but not locked down just yet, because we have to take care of that. See, you can barely get a bolt in there. Well, you're gonna have to put all this back together and then raise that up to get that last bolt in. So let's grab our cover plate and our new bushing, and let's at least get that placed in and get those 3 bolts in there. Our next bushing is this one, and it should go in with this here facing that way, and that contoured edge going into your plate. So we'll just flip this around, and again, all dry, and you're gonna set it in there and just hand push that in. And then we'll grease up in here and along here, and then we'll put it on. Okay, we got that bushing on there, so now we're gonna take it and we will get 3 bolts in and get this started. Make sure to grease up this part here and inside here and on that back lip, and then pop it on. Okay, it's greased up, so let's get this on. And just work it all the way back until you're tight up against there. All right, so we have 3 bolts, and they're not quite all the way down. They're just kind of finger tight right now. They're almost finger tight. And we're just gonna tighten up those 3 and leaving this one open. So let's get in there with our 17 millimeter ratchet, and let's get those snug down. And when you're tightening these down, just kind of go in a crisscross pattern. That way it pulls down that cover nice and straight. Kind of wanted to take a moment and show you these holes back here. Now remember, these are the holes of the bolts that go through that hold it on, that hold the spring plate to the banana arm. It's these two, and as you can tell, the differences that adjust your toe in and toe out and your camber up and down and then side to side. So that's what those look like. And those bolts, remember the 12 millimeter Allens go on the back side, the small one goes here, the big one goes here, and those go in, and then we'll get this back one situated as well. Now I have that axle up off the jack to give us enough clearance and room to get some work done. But let's go ahead and drop this, get this aligned up. And remember our scribe mark, we're gonna line it back up into here until we can get to the alignment shop, a Porsche alignment shop, and have them dial all this in for us. All right, let's put it together. Okay guys, so what I'm using here is just a C-clamp to bring the two plates together, and you can see that we're off a little bit. So to get that lined up, obviously we're gonna have to bring up the arm to meet that, because now this here, because we've locked it down in a sense, is not going to move. So we have to bring this up. So we're just going to take the jack and put it underneath the trailing arm, and we'll jack it up to bring this up to where it will match that. We can put our bolts in. So let's get that jack and let's jack it up a little bit. All right, so as you can see, we're pretty much on the money of that scribe line. Remember, you can jack it up to raise it up and down, and this is actually free moving. You can move this back and forth and a little bit of up and down play in it in order to re-get this lined up. So with that being lined up, let's go ahead and we'll get these bolts in first loose, and then we'll put in those bolts. Now, getting those two bolts in back there sometimes can be a little tricky. You can take a screwdriver and stick it in one of these holes or in between something, just to kind of give you a little bit of leverage in order to get that bolt in to where it'll settle back down. So don't be afraid to do that. Now that we got those in, we'll go ahead and put on there the nuts and washers on the back side, and we'll move up to our camber bolt and our toe-in bolt. All right, so this is gonna be our camber bolt. As you can tell, it's a 12 millimeter Allen on this end, and just see how that's like a cam. It's a eccentric bolt. So what happens is this part's gonna ride, and as you turn it, it will change the height or the angle of the camber. So we're just gonna go ahead and take those, and we'll pump it in back here, going this way. Find the hole, and then you can just kind of feel it. It should lock in there. I'll grab that washer. Let's put it on there. And remember, it is the bigger of the two nuts and the bigger of the two bolts that go on there. So we'll get this. Make sure I don't cross thread this. Okay. And now let's get in here and we'll do this backside right here. This one, that'll be our toe in. All right, we got that in nice and tight. Throw our washer on. And our thinner nut of the two. Kind of get that going. Okay, so now we're a little off again, so let's go ahead and readjust this to where we're on the money so we can tighten down those nuts. So I want to show you what we're doing here. We've got that 12 millimeter Allen on the back side. I just kind of want to watch how it moves. See how I'm moving it, or if I reverse it. See, I'm moving it with those two bolts back there. So you take your time and you get it relined up with where you're at, and then once it's lined up, then you'll take your torque wrench, we'll torque all these down. But let's first make sure we get this as close as we can. Looks like we got those pretty much in alignment where they were at before. And again, that's good enough to get us to Don Jackson's in North Phoenix to have DJ and the crew go ahead and do a front and a rear alignment now that we've rebuilt both the front and the back. And yes, I do know we did not replace the bushing on the inside of the arm, but that requires removal of the transmission and the engine, and just something I just don't have time with right now, but I will get to it eventually. When I get ready to do the wheel bearings, I'll go ahead and pull all this out when I pull the engine out and do some more things to it. I have a couple more items I want to do, but I just want to get those bushings done, replaced, put this back together, and get things as close as can be. And oh, we still need to put that in. So let's jack this up so we can get some clearance to get that in there. Let me do that real quick. Well guys, we've done it. We have successfully reinstalled everything and got our shock back in. I actually went in and ordered new shocks, so those will come in next week. I'll get a video on replacing those here very soon. But now it's time to torque. Let's torque all these down. Let's grab our torque wrench and I'll tell you what the torque settings are for these bolts. These 4 bolts here, which are 17 millimeter, you torque them down to 34 foot-pounds. All right, get that off. All right, we'll go around and do the other side. Our camber one, this one right here, that is set at 36 foot-pounds. So we'll get that. There's 36 on that one. Oh, and that one there is set at 43 foot-pounds. And get that. Okay, got it. And last but not least, those 2 bolts back there get done at 65 foot-pounds. Let's get in there and I'll take care of those. Okay, so everything is now torqued down, buttoned down. And oh, we still gotta put that on. And that simply just kind of comes up, kind of fits into place right there. It's about like that. There we go. And then on the back side, and then we'll just tighten this down 8 millimeters. Cool. All right. Well, we'll do that to the other side. And we'll straighten that up and we'll put the wheel back on. We'll go for a test drive.